Hello and welcome to this very special TrustCon edition of Ctrl-Alt-Speech. You got the memo. Ctrl-Alt-Speech is the podcast where we make sense of the major debates shaping online speech, content moderation, platform power, and the future of the internet. It is absolutely brilliant to see so many of you here back at TrustCon again. You've had 3 very intense days of panel discussions, corridor conversations, and maintaining that ever-depleting social battery that many of you have. So it's fantastic that you've taken the time out here. I'm very personally proud to be back at TrustCon. I wasn't here last year. I didn't get to be part of this. I had a little baby boy, and I can confirm that he is okay. And yes, I'm still very tired. But yeah, for those who don't know me, I'm Ben Whitelaw. I'm the founder and editor of Everything in Moderation, an independent media outlet focusing on trust and safety, online regulation, and online speech. For this very special recording, we have a fantastic panel with us. The man at the end needs no introduction. He is the founder and editor of TechDirt. He is the co-host of Ctrl-Alt-Speech. He is the man whose articles we send to family and friends when we want something complex explained, and we can't be bothered to do it. It is Mike Masnick, everyone. And the 2 women in the middle also barely need introduction. They are kind of long-standing members of this community. Kat Duffy is Senior Fellow for Digital and Cyberspace Policy and Director of the Lead AI at Council of Foreign Relations. She has spent more than 2 decades working across technology, democracy, corporate responsibility, and human rights, and she has one of the best Twitter handles known to man. Go and look that up. Give a warm welcome to Kat, please.
To be clear, it's a Blue Sky handle now.
And a Mastodon one as well, yeah.
And a Mastodon as well.
But I found it on Twitter. Also to her left, we've got Zoe Darme, who is the Director of Trust, Knowledge and Information Products, which is a hell of a title, at Google. And has previously worked at a plethora of organizations and institutions, including Microsoft, Meta, and the UN, no less. So please give Zoe a warm welcome to the podcast as well. I should say that when I have told people that Kat and Zoe will be on the podcast, they have done one of 2 things. Their eyes have widened in excitement, or they have rubbed their hands with glee. So this could get very, very interesting and very fun very quickly. So it's amazing to be here, and we've got a fantastic panel, and we're looking to get started.
Yeah, and before we start getting into the stories, I did want to thank TSPA for allowing us to do this for the 3rd year in a row. We'll see how well we do to come back again in the future. But TSPA, again, I think everybody here recognizes that they put on a really wonderful conference. TrustCon every year gets better and better and more exhausting for me personally, but I think it's been wonderful. So I just want to start out by thanking all of the TSPA people, volunteers, and yeah, everyone involved with that. So thank you so much. As I said, this is a live recording of a podcast. The actual recording should go out on the feed on Friday, assuming everything goes well. So you can go back and re-listen to it and hear yourself scream and clap and all that kind of fun stuff. But if you're looking for something to listen to on the way home, if you traveled here, just earlier today, we put out a sponsored Spotlight episode with Dan Hayes from PwC, talking about their new trust and safety outlook, talking about major themes related to trust and safety, what is happening today, and how trust and safety can be more strategic. It was a really interesting discussion that Ben had with Dan that we recorded yesterday, Monday? I can't remember. I don't know what day it is.
It's all the same.
Don't worry about it. Also, the other announcement before we get into stuff is that, different from past years, we now have a Patreon, and you can support us on the Patreon. If you go to patreon.com, Ctrl-Alt-Speech, somebody cheered. That was great. We like it. If you look on a bunch of seats, especially ones in the front, and I see there's still, on this side of the room, there are still some empty seats. There should be some cards, some of which give discounts. If you want to sign up for our Patreon, you can sign up and get a special discount. If you're not seated in a seat with a card, you can get up and find one, move forward a little bit, or you can find Ben or I after the podcast, and we will magically hand you a card that gives you a discount on the Patreon. If you subscribe to the Patreon, you get early access to our podcast, and you get the extended versions where we think nobody's listening, so we get really spicy. I think that's it. I think let's get into the stories.
Yeah, that's enough admin. Let's do this. You will get a chance to ask questions at the end of our stories that we'll run through. So if you feel desperate, put a pin in it. We'll come to you for sure. And yeah, let's kick off with a story that I've heard discussed quite extensively in corridors over the last few days. One person that I walked past literally exclaimed, "Holy shit," when they heard about this. And this is the story that one of OpenAI's models has gone rogue and hacked Hugging Face. Mike, you're going to lead us on this. What caught your eye, and kind of give us the background to it, first of all?
Yeah, so this, I think a lot of people have seen this, and I keep talking to people, and I keep hearing people like, what happened? And it's interesting to sort of follow the timeline of how this came out, which was that on Friday, Hugging Face made this announcement, we got hacked, and it was clearly some sort of automated agent, and it did all these things, and it kept escalating and getting around guardrails, and we think that it was some sort of very strong model, and our own models that were trying to stop it were unable to, or to recreate what happened, and we don't know who did it. And the implication, sort of reading through it, or at least my read on it when I first saw it, was like, it feels like nation state hacked into this AI platform and was trying to figure out what's going on. Then 2 days go by, Monday, and there's an announcement from OpenAI where they say, we have partnered with Hugging Face to explore this hacking and figure out what happened, because it turns out that it was actually OpenAI, that they were testing their new Soul model and another undisclosed model where they were trying to test some of its cybersecurity capabilities, and they were using one that had basically the guardrails turned off, but in theory, they thought was sandboxed, and that it wasn't supposed to be able to get out.
It's a very evil laugh you've got, sir. I like That's perfectly timed.
Great laugh from the audience. And so what happened was it was trying to figure out effectively how to beat this specific evaluation, and slowly but surely kind of kept escalating and trying different things, and figured out how to get out of the sandbox, get out onto the internet, figured out that Hugging Face would have the details of the eval, figured out how to get stolen credentials to hack into Hugging Face, and then begin to go around and explore and exploit its access to Hugging Face. So there are a number of different strange things about this that have people freaking out. There's just the fact that these models are getting so powerful. There's the fact that OpenAI was apparently not monitoring what this model was doing over a course of a few days, perhaps. There's the cynical version of this that I heard from a couple people that, this is OpenAI who is upset about all the marketing that Anthropic got with Mythos, where they're saying, this is too powerful, we can't release it. They said, we need our own story of the too powerful model. How about the one that hacked Hugging Face? That's a very cynical take. But it does seem to show an escalation in a different sort of way. When we normally are talking about safety issues with AI, people, this was sort of the science fiction version of it, but now there's at least a somewhat real example of it sort of going rogue and being able to get out into the world.
Yeah, Zoe, you've almost stopped shaking your head. Give us your thoughts on this, because it's fairly unprecedented, isn't it?
Yeah, the thing I first thought when I heard about this story was, gosh, the models are like the A students, right? You tell them what you want them to do, and they really, 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 really want to go and do that. And so that was my first reaction to it. I think the other reaction that I had to it, or just a couple of things. One is reflecting on 3 days. It has been 3 days. It's like the days are all running together on our profession. I did actually like how clear it was. You laughed and you were cynical, but the announcement that OpenAI and Hugging Face were working together on this, because it really shows that Some of these safety and security issues shouldn't be solved in isolation. They probably can't be solved in isolation. So there will need to be that continuation of what we do as a profession best, which is set aside kind of the competitive pressures and figure out how to address some of these incidents or just hard problems facing our industry. And then the other thing I think about it is you mentioned that it had that the incident team had to turn to an open source model that had some of the safety guardrails turned off so that the team could do the analysis of the attack. And I thought that was particularly interesting. I won't get into, oh my gosh, it's a Chinese model. What do we think about that? And all of that. But I thought those types of things that's where my head went to. But Kat, I don't know, we talked about this at midnight last night, so maybe you have more coherent thoughts.
I mean, a cringing face, I like angry face, I don't know. You know that phrase, to your point on the model is the A student? First of all, I feel like if there's anyone here who hasn't seen the Reese Witherspoon movie from forever ago, Election, where she's Tracy Flick, basically Tracy Flick is embodies what I feel like these models look like, and I highly recommend that everyone watch it this weekend. That phrase of never admit, or never attribute to malevolence that which you can attribute to incompetence. I don't know here if this is. We know it wasn't malevolent, thankfully, because that would be even scarier if it had been. But also, I don't know if we can attribute this to incompetence of the team that built this sandbox and was running this agent because they had pulled down some barriers because its job was to be testing for software vulnerabilities, which it certainly found. Or on the other hand, now it's going to be never attribute to malevolence what you can attribute to breathtaking, unexpected, unprecedented competence, which to some degree is how this agent operated. I think the takeaways, there's some major takeaways for me. One is that when you see this type of reporting coming out, it clarifies again that there is no responsibility for any company to disclose any of this right now. And I wrote about this a few months ago when we were looking at the Chinese incursion into Anthropic, and Anthropic took a really a significant political risk in disclosing that incursion had occurred. People liked it, they didn't like that they disclosed it, they didn't like how much they disclosed it, yada, yada, yada. But they did not have to disclose anything, and they did. There is no ground right now. There is no floor in terms of what needs to be disclosed with the frontier systems, with agents, how they're operating, what breaches are occurring. More importantly, there is no space, especially a legally protected space, for those companies and the deployers to be able to share information about the breaches that they're seeing, about the incursions that they're seeing. And so we know anecdotally that there's sort of bilat sharing that will happen sort of between the frontier companies, right? Or between a company, like a deployer and a frontier company. But there is no legally created, protected, safe space in which these disclosures can occur. And that is incredibly important because we are not going to get an attack into one model or one company. That is not the way this is going to look. Attacks are going to go across platforms. They're going to go across different companies. They're going to go across different models. They're going to stack different models. And this is where I come back to, we've had a fundamental breakdown as well in the firmament of our cybersecurity reporting and vulnerability infrastructure with the demolition of CISA, with the defunding of the multi-state ISAC. We're going to see that same thing now with the defunding of the elections ISAC. And so right now what we've had in the federal government's move to pull back on a lot of governance has also left a massive convening and authoritative hole where we could have built for this type of disclosure, for this type of protection, and for this type of independent reporting and analysis that we don't even, it's not just that we need this as a community, the entire world needs this from the United States because we are at the forefront of these models. And so these are all, for me, at a systems level, things that I really have in mind.
Do you think, the trust and safety world has often come up with different systems and organizations and setups for signal sharing around different things, whether it's terrorist content or CSAM or whatnot, mostly not intermediated by government or setting up, spaces that involve the government. Is that the solution that these companies? I mean, I wasn't being. The cynical part was the way that OpenAI sort of presented as, we've partnered with, as opposed to, but like, I do think it's good that Hugging Face and OpenAI are working together to sort of figure this out. But is that the kind of thing that we should hope to see or expect to see organizational infrastructure where the companies get together and set up systems for sharing, early alerts or ways to notify each other, like, hey, our bot went rogue and attacked you. Though I should note, by the way, I saw somebody earlier complaining about people saying, the bot went rogue. But as both of you were saying, like, it didn't go rogue. It just did what what it told you to do and figured out the best way to do that, which just happened to be, getting out of the sandbox and hacking.
It went Tracy Flick.
Yes, to the extreme digital level. But do you think that it's a place where the industry side of it should be putting together the frameworks and structures in order to do some kind of signal alert sharing for these kinds of situations, especially with the government sort of stepping back from it?
I mean, to some degree, some of these already exist. So you have things like Cyber Threat Alliance, right? You have a couple of different cybersecurity infrastructural spaces in which some reporting can be done. What we're seeing in that space is the same thing that I think we're seeing actually in the child safety space. The pipes are getting flooded because there are so many vulnerabilities that are being found, right? Because people are running models to find vulnerabilities. So now, like, the reporting mechanisms for vulnerabilities, and it's not clear if there was an incursion or not. So in the same way that we're getting tons of reporting on, like, is it synthetic media? Is it true? Like, is it synthetic CSAM? Is it real CSAM? How, we are essentially, even in the cyber reporting models right now, it's almost like a DDoS in terms of the existing pipelines and mechanisms that we have to take it in. But the other thing is that this cannot be industry funded and industry led and industry driven. Like, at some point, especially in a CapEx race as the bloodbath to the degree that we are currently in, the companies should not have to weigh whether or not they are taking on an economic or political risk by voluntarily disclosing the mere basics, when you could level the playing field by saying everybody has to disclose this certain amount. There's mechanisms that you can create to incentivize that. You want to be able to give companies air cover, for example, to be able to disclose that this happened without necessarily saying it happened to them. So it can be good to have an intermediary, but you do not want to have an intermediary that is completely funded by industry, because if industry is funding the intermediary and the intermediary becomes annoying for industry, it's also then very easy for industry to walk away and the funding falls down.
I mean, in this case, obviously, the companies publicly reported it. There have been other breaches before that the companies have publicly reported. Do you think that there's an issue with companies not reporting these kinds of breaches? Like, how is, I mean, I don't know, but like, do you think that's happening where they're similar, maybe not as egregious and not as big a deal, but that there are these kinds of security breaches that are happening that are sort of being swept under the rug?
I don't even know that they would be being swept under the rug. I mean, we don't even know which ones are being identified and which aren't, right? I mean, it took an AI system for Hugging Face to figure out that this was even happening. And I think that for me, the bigger question is, we would have absolutely no idea of knowing that. None at all. Like, I wouldn't want to speculate, because it's possible that this is not really a thing. Like, it's not really a bad practice, and companies are being very forthcoming. It's possible you've got one very bad actor in the mix who's not disclosing anything, and you've got some other better faith actors that are trying to disclose things. I have more faith, frankly, in the more mature companies as well, because they've built muscle memory around things like disclosures and how you navigate that and the importance of working on those issues. But to me, the fundamental question there is, how would any of us know? And we can't. That's unconscionable. We cannot continue to live in that level of ignorance.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really interested in I mean, that's a great point. I'm really interested in the way this story might be used by various groups in the conversation about how to regulate AI. You know, the AI companies said, actually, you know, the problem with this incident was that there was, you know, the guardrails that we're forced to put in place stopped us investigating this. So, hands off, don't regulate what we do. Obviously, politicians are saying this is the incident that means we have to go faster in terms of regulating. what kind of effect do you think this particular story and incident will have in both of those potential outcomes? Maybe Zoe, you want to chime in first?
Yeah, I don't actually know a great answer for this because I don't know how much our policymakers really are really in tune with the risks, benefits, and all the kind of technical details of what agentic AI is. You know, I was joking with my team when we were submitting these proposals. Charlotte, I hope you're not listening. But we were saying,
apparently she went to the other session.
Yeah, she went to the other session, so that's her problem.
Do not get me started on that.
But I was saying, it's not blockchain this year. It's agentic. Make it about agentic AI. You know, that'll catch people's attention. And I actually think, this is showing that we do need more people, more really smart, great, seasoned trust and safety professionals kind of really thinking about agentic AI, defining what agentic AI is. And we're kind of in this position where like we know it when we see it type of thing. And I think if that's where we are, how do you regulate that? And how do you regulate that in a future-proof way? I do think it's incidents like these that really drive the political pressure to do so. And I hope that we can just have enough space to breathe to really figure out what needs to get regulated, in what way, and how we can enforce those things when not every agent is going to be run by a giant American tech company.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that strikes me about that, sort of building on what Zoe was just saying, is that this story is getting a lot of attention because it seems crazy and it seems cinematic in some way, right? Agent goes crazy and hacks by itself. That's the kind of thing that, I think leads to bad regulations and bad law because people will over-index on it because it's so memorable and it stands out. Oh my gosh, this agentic thing, went out and hacked stuff, when that is not necessarily a real-world thing that we should expect to happen. Like me running Claude Code, I'm not going to be able to like have it go try and build me a little tool to check the news, and it's not going to go hack Hugging Face or something else, right? But from the regulator side and the policymaker side, they're going to say, wait, oh my gosh, these things are out of control. We have to stop them. And that's how you get bad laws generally. When you have sort of a big disaster like this, and then the regulation is not sort of thoughtful, how do we approach this in a thoughtful way, but like, we have to do something, really bad stuff happened, crazy agents, so that's my worry about kind of where it goes.
But I would say you've seen in the last, 6 weeks, maybe 5 weeks, we've seen a proposal from Dario, you've seen a proposal from Anthropic for essentially a governance structure that is, if I remember correctly, sort of FDA-based. And then you have Sam Altman coming out and yet again sort of pushing to nuclear governance, which, spoiler alert, if you know anyone in nuclear governance, they will all be like, do not go for nuclear governance. Did not work the way you think it worked. And then you had Darme just recently put out his proposal, which is based more on FINRA, which is self-regulation of in the finance industry. And there is also now apparently a proposal that's floating around in the White House that came from Treasury Secretary Bessent, which is being also sort of aligned with a FINRA-esque model, but is slightly different than the one that Darme Sasabi's proposed. And so what I think is interesting about this is that you've had, on one hand, a very anti-regulation. Governance is the inherent enemy of innovation. Our industry's ability to proceed completely unfettered is a national security and strategic competitive advantage, and it's an imperative. And that has more or less been the narration of the last 18 months. And now what you have seen is all three major frontier companies come in with governance proposals, as well as a proposal floating around in the White House. This is coming out on Friday. So anyway, tomorrow, you guys will see an article from me and my colleagues Vinh Nguyen and Elham Tabasi at Brookings, where we go through this approach and we talk about the different ingredients that we think a governance model would need in this space in order to have political legitimacy and credibility. And so I hope everybody will check that out. But we are and we have entered an interesting moment of governance discourse because the ad hoc interventions we've seen from the federal government since February in terms of the Pentagon, DOD, Mythos, closing, Fable, Glasswing, then limiting Glasswing, all of that has created such phenomenal unpredictability that I think now what you're seeing, understandably, is the leading companies saying, we don't want you to regulate us so much that we can't move forward, that we can't progress, but also we cannot operate in a business environment with this amount of instability and this total lack of predictability. And so those two things are converging right now, and I would say watch this space because they're converging quickly and the power dynamics have shifted.
And you'll have all the answers in that Saturday piece.
100%. Absolutely. All you guys needed was a think piece from a think tank, and we're sorted. Everyone just really over-admires the problem,
Also, I can't gloss over the fact that there was a tiny but very audible cheer for FINRA in the audience, which was not on my bingo card for today's episode of Ctrl-Alt-Speech, which is a nice way to kind of round up that story. Thank you guys for your thoughts there. The chances of doing a kind of Ctrl-Alt-Speech episode without some sort of social media ban chat was, I think, close to zero. And our good friends in France have done their duty and given us a story to talk about this week, which I'm going to kind of talk through. So on Tuesday, France kind of became the first European country to ban social media for teens and announced a block for new accounts starting in September to coincide with the start of the school year. And it would apply subsequently to existing accounts from January. So in the next 6 months, kind of all under 15s would essentially be banned from social media. As with other bans, there's a big focus on age assurance technology in order to kind of make that happen. And we can talk about the kind of some of the privacy and surveillance concerns associated with that. It does coincide quite interestingly with a cell phone ban in high schools as well, which was part of the legislation, and that extends a ban that happens in middle schools and primary schools in France. So again, there's an interesting kind of link between social media and smartphones, even though, as many people in the room will know, those things are not always fully linked. And President Macron was very effusive in his praise for himself and his government. As you might expect, for getting this done and for France kind of leading the way in protecting teens. Interestingly, it comes a week after President Ursula von der Leyen came up with Europe's own plan for regulating social media for teens in Europe. But the fact that he's come out now, I think, suggests that he doesn't believe that process is happening fast enough, and it could take kind of between a year and 2 years, depending on who you speak to. So this is France kind of taking the bull by the horns and saying, no, we're going to do it by our timelines. I don't really want to get into the kind of effectiveness of bans here, because
we have done that so many times. You can go back and listen to many discussions on the effectiveness of these bans.
Exactly, and
or lack thereof, I should say.
And I'm sure there'll be questions from the audience as well. I think there's still a debate to be had, but we only have 50 minutes. I'm kind of interested in what your guys think about how policymakers in the trust and safety field should respond to this clear public and political need for something to be done, and the fact that bans have become such a kind of powerful force. How do we respond other than pushing back on the idea of bans?
Well, I'm going to start this by saying I have worked on child safety, and you can hear the kind of sigh in my voice now for 6 years across 2 companies, and it's. I won't claim to be a child development expert. I won't claim to say I know what's best for kids and that sort of thing. What I will say is, having been in all of these conversations for so many years, there is no other policy issue that starts with, as a parent, I think. And we don't start conversations about Hugging Face and Open as a victim of a cyber attack, I think. And there's
as an agent.
Exactly. And so I think it is so hard to check your priors at the door when we're talking about these types of issues. And I do it myself. I catch myself starting with, as a parent of a 12-year-old, my experience as a parent of a 12-year-old in a very privileged environment in a coastal city is almost irrelevant, to when we're thinking about what the impacts are across all of our users, not just our child users. And there's a 230 expert out there who many of us know and love, and she was being questioned about tech law because this issue has to do with tech law, and she was asked, "Yeah, but are you a mother?" As if that's like a disqualifying question, right? Or are you a parent or something like that? And I really think that the question should be. Have you read the law? Have you read the law? Have you read the legislative text, right? Because I have been in so many of these conversations, and people have so many opinions. And the classic thing we say to all these hard problems, oh, well, the devil's in the details. I'm like, how many of us have read the details? Do we know what the scoping definition is of social media in France and Australia and wherever? Why are we choosing U15 here? Why are we choosing U16 here? Is that based in evidence in child development, brain development, any things like that? Is it banning kids from social media because that's what gets the headline? Or is it banning from new accounts, which, Ben, thank you for being clear about what the France law says. And then, just in child safety laws generally, if we're thinking about app stores too, it's what's the knowledge standard? What do you do about a conflict in age? Are you supposed to take the highest confidence signal? Are you supposed to take the lowest age? These are all details that really matter. I am not a lawyer, I will say that very happily, with all due respect. I am not a lawyer, but as someone who works on designing the product, these are implementation details that matter, not just for technical complexity, but also the impacts to our users. And so the next time somebody starts a child safety conversation with you, I really hope you said, but did you read the law?
Yeah.
And then we can talk about your kids. I love to hear about all your children.
Yeah. I mean, I put a photo of mine up on the screen last year, so I'm maybe not a good person to speak to. But I'm being a little bit facetious here, but I think actually being a parent is a hindrance to the way that a lot of people talk about social media bans, because it obviously it brings a lot of emotion and a lot of kind of tension up, and I've actually kind of written and spoken about how these social media bans are almost a kind of referendum on parenting, as much as they are a kind of vote on how people think about big tech and social media. Clearly there is an overlap there, but parenting is one thing, and as you say, the law is another thing, and we shouldn't kind of get the two mixed up. Kat, what did you think about the kind of France proposal and how it relates to other bans that we're seeing in the UK and elsewhere?
I mean, I saw the headlines, and my reaction in my head was basically like, merde,
That was on my bingo card, actually. I knew that was going to happen.
And then I just went and stress ate a baguette. So a couple of things. One, on the question around policymakers, right? So many of the policymakers and so many of the parents as well, and frankly, our kids, are getting their information about this and are getting their understanding about this from how the media is reporting on it. And if you read the media reporting that has come out, it is so shoddy. It is not at all a deep dive into what the true intent of the law would be, how it would pan out. I mean, I've only read an English translation of it, but from what I can tell, I mean, again, it's about accounts, it's not about social media, and then the definition of where you can't have accounts is so vast that I don't think a kid could use Scratch. I don't think they would be able to use Duolingo. I don't think all of these things that many people would say are a good and healthy use of a digital tool or app for a kid, I think under this law, my just plain reading of it would suggest that those are not allowable. And how many people are thinking about Scratch, as social media? Hopefully no one. So there's that. I really think that we need, I think we need more intellectual honesty and rigor from those who are reporting specifically on things like social media bans, because they capture the attention, the concern, and the passion of so many people, and it's important to then be specific about what is actually being proposed. The second thing I would say is I could not agree more with Zoe. Like, I'm a mom, I've got 2 kids. That makes me sort of an expert maybe on any given day in maybe one of my kids. That's the entirety of it, right? I am not an expert in child safety. And I don't have to have kids to be an expert in child safety. And anyone who would suggest that you can't be an expert or a champion for child safety because you somehow like haven't decided to, you haven't yet or don't want to or whatever it might be, parent, like step off. And so this is where I think this community is so important. I can't overestimate how important I think it is for the expertise that sits in this community in terms of that attention to detail, in terms of having a pragmatic understanding of how a particular rule or policy may or may not play out, in terms of building out open source tooling, right, and better interoperability. These are such important steps, and I'm just very grateful for this community. And I'm sorry, can I get on my last hobby horse?
Please.
I want to see the ban instead on parents making boatloads of money by using their children's images and using videos of their children in order to fuel a creator economy. There's no informed consent for your 4-year-old that you allow to become a meme. There's no informed consent for your family videos. Like, no. Leah Plunkett has done beautiful work on sharenting that I think is so great. And when I think about child safety, as the brilliant Rihanna Pfefferkorn, who is sitting right here, knows, because we wrote a paper on this together several years ago, child safety is one thing children should have. It is one of many rights that children are guaranteed, both through international law and treaty, through domestic and state law in the United States, through state laws in some places, and certainly through domestic law in other nations. They have all sorts of other rights beyond safety. Safety is one of them. And the more that we conscribe or limit what they are allowed to being safe, I mean, how many of us grew from being fully safe all the time, and who thinks that that is a reality? And so this is the other thing where, like, I think I would rather see a child be safe from sharenting than see a child be safe from Scratch.
Yeah. I mean, to what extent are we... You mentioned about the kind of media reporting on this and the kind of lack of understanding that breeds maybe among the general public. To what extent is this about the lack of detail around the policy announcement in the first place? I mean, we saw it in the UK where there was a glitzy announcement and the Prime Minister got up and said, this is my legacy and, here's the ban. 3 months later, there's a bit more detail. Maybe 3 months later, there'll be more detail. It makes it hard actually to report on it if there's very little substance. Is that not part of the problem, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's my reaction to this, is that so much of these bans are more for politicians to say something must be done, this is something, we'll do it, sort of the classic political fallacy, that, the details are always somewhat different and each one matters in what they are, but it's more about getting the headlines and saying we're doing something than actually figuring out, is this something that will actually keep children safer or respect their rights or things of that nature. There's just this, pull for action, whether or not it's actually helppful.
Yeah, and just go back to the point you made earlier, Kat, about parents not being policy experts. I spoke to the founder of one very influential parenting campaigning group in the UK, who was largely responsible for the number of consultation responses in the UK social media ban consultation, and who was there at the launch of the kind of announcement of the ban. And they admitted to me, we don't know anything about policy, which is a very kind of scary place to be when a group that powerful doesn't necessarily know the implications of what they're advocating for.
I also just really wish we would ask kids.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, just bring them into the conversation. Children are they're not a monolith, they have a voice.
Yeah. And there's been lots of good, actually, sessions into this year's TrustCon about people trying to do that at platforms with some difficulty. But
there was also just a study that came out that surveyed a bunch of kids. So we're starting to see that, but it doesn't get us into the conversation nearly as much.
Yeah, maybe a little bit too late. In terms of other stories we want to talk about today, it'd be remiss not to have a live recording without mentioning Elon Musk or one of his companies. This is essentially this is essentially a greatest hits of stories we talked about, Mike. But you found a kind of very interesting, quite niche story that you wanted to bring to listeners today.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's the larger story that I think a lot of people, obviously, I mean, you'd have to be living under a rock to not have heard the story from late last year and earlier this year, where Grok, which is the AI component of X, which is owned by XAI, which is owned by SpaceX, which whatever, where it was, producing declothed pictures of individuals, where you could ask Grok to put various people into bikinis, was tended to be the prompt. And Elon Musk encouraged this, and even posted a picture that Grok had made of himself wearing a bathing suit, and sort of laughed about it as other people were doing this, even as it was clear that it was also being used at that time to produce CSAM or CSAM adjacent stuff, certainly horrifying in many, many ways. That story has continued to evolve in all different ways. A bunch of people have sued variations of Elon's companies for this. There have also been some people who were arrested for producing CSAM with Grok. So the thing that happened that caught my attention last week was that X or XAI, I forget which entity of the entities was the actual party in the lawsuit, sued one of the individuals who had been arrested for producing CSAM. And this is the first time that I can remember, and I could be wrong and I could miss a lawsuit somewhere, of a platform suing one of their users for, as they said in the thing, violating a terms of service in some form or another. Usually if you violate the terms of service, there can be actions taken against you. Usually that is, either limiting your access or kicking you off the platform entirely. Suing them, filing a civil suit against them, strikes me as very different and an escalation in all sorts of ways. There's also the questions of then, like, wait, what? Like, why? How? And so there are a number of different possible answers to why. I think one of it is the company realizing that it is coming out of this looking very badly for a variety of potentially very good reasons, but also deciding maybe we can change the story if we're suing the user and say, the first it's a very short complaint, and the first half of the complaint is basically, here's all the stuff we do because we take CSAM really, really seriously, never mentioning the fact that their CEO was out there promoting this functionality of Grok, and saying, this guy was arrested because we reported it to NCMEC, and we do all this NCMEC reporting, and we take all these things seriously, and therefore we're relying on the indemnification clause, which every one of these platforms has an indemnification clause, basically saying that you will hold them harmless, or if you do something that causes a lawsuit, you will agree to pay all their legal bills. They're relying on that indemnification clause to say, well, we can sue this guy, though it's unclear if the victims of this particular person is suing them, is there a specific lawsuit, but it just felt like a massive escalation and change, and there was no limiting factor in the lawsuit that wouldn't necessarily apply to any other platform saying, you violated our terms of service, now we're going to sue you, leaning on our indemnification clause, because your violation of our service caused us potential legal problems, we're going to sue you and demand money from you. That struck me as different and a little scary.
Yeah, maybe this is the thing that will finally get users to read terms of service.
I have two quick takes on this, right? One is, I don't hate the idea of racking and stacking accountability 12 ways to Sunday for CSAM production. Go after them any which way we can, right? A. B, I know the SpaceX IPO did not go well, but this feels like a really nickel and dime approach to try to build your revenue back up. I just don't know that it's going to play out for them from a cost effectiveness standpoint.
Every little helps, Kat. Zoe, what did you think about their story?
Yeah, I agree with Kat that, I think it's worth ensuring that individuals are held responsible for CSAM generation. I don't know if I have an opinion on whether suing your users is the way to do that. I do think that whenever we take a new precedential step, it often happens with CSAM. And I think there's just an interesting set of trade-offs when you're deciding to do actor-based enforcement, when you're deciding to do content-based enforcement. We've always been more comfortable with actor-based enforcement with CSAM, not least because of the legal reporting requirements. But I do always think that when we are breaking new ground with CSAM, there's always pressure to say, okay, well, you do it for CSAM, so why not XYZ? I get that for every violation type, well, you did this for CSAM, how come you can't just do it for NCEI? How come you can't just do it for hate speech? How come you can't just do it for suicide and self-harm? And it's not the same. It's just not the same. And one of the reasons it's not the same is because CSAM is in some ways a uniquely good machine learning problem, right? You can classify, and thank you, Griffin Hunt, for teaching me this, by the way. Before I go on, can I just say, raise your hand if you work on CSAM. Turn and thank these people.
Yeah.
The best PMs I've worked with have worked on CSAM, the best eng, the best lawyers work on it because you have to be a special type of person, a really committed type of person. And those people have taught me that one of the reasons CSAM is different, not because of the severity, not because of the reporting requirements, not just because it's one of those harm types that's almost universally illegal, but also because you can teach a classifier, is this explicitness? Yes, no. Is this potential underageness? Yes, no. That's a classic machine learning problem in a way that a lot of the other harm types aren't, where there's more subjectivity. I don't know where Dave Wilner is, probably at the other thing that Charlotte told everyone to go to.
What a scab.
So he might disagree with me and say, no, you can teach the magic robots to do all sorts of labeling. But I actually think, there is something a little bit different about CSAM. And so that's where, even if it does turn out to be a good idea to sue people to stop CSAM generation, I would always caution us to pause and think, what about CSAM makes the response unique to CSAM?
Yeah, I think that's a good call out.
And we should also clarify that we love Charlotte and Dave.
We do,
Oodles
we
and
do.
noodles and boodles. And this is just friends
trolling
hating.
them.
That was a joke. That was my British humour. My one job here was to keep time, and I've failed to do that in great detail. So I'm looking pleadingly at our room host to see if we can have maybe a couple of questions from the audience. Amazing. That was kind of a yes.
So do we have...
So two lucky people perhaps can ask questions of our great panel. This gentleman, actually, Ian, you had a question 2 years ago, I'm afraid. I can't have you, yeah, I'm sorry, but you can't have a question again. You were up fast, though.
So there have been a few lawsuits before where platforms have sued their users. Twitch has done so at least twice. Once against hate raid bot software makers, once previously for follower count inflate bot makers. In that previous lawsuit, the original lawsuit 10 years ago, they got a $1.3 million judgment against those guys. Surely judgment proof. And then also in a very long ago past life, I helped Twitter to sue software makers for spamming the platform. So it is an antecedent for that. Elon Musk, of course, has also sued places like the Center for Countering Digital Hate and other organizations for the same TOS violations, for trying to show things like there's Nazi speech alongside ads on the platform.
That was the best comment as a question that I've ever had.
If you're going to get a comment as a question, you want it to be from someone as expert as Rihanna.
Yeah, for sure. I think that means we still get 2 questions, right?
I saw a hand over here somewhere.
Jeff, I think that's you.
Hi. I'm wondering, how do we move past the kind of paradigm that we're in with regulation, where regulators are like, hey, your platforms kind of suck, and we're seeing it hurt our citizens. And then platforms are like, hey, your regulation sucks, and is like off target. And it's like, my honest take is I kind of agree with both, at least when it comes to like age gating, and age assurance. And there's another comment in a different session that was like, oh, we really wish that regulators had more data and more understanding, of how the platforms worked. And it's like, well, platforms are now required to put out risk assessments. Those risk assessments are required to include, how the platforms deal with child safety. I've read more of those risk assessments than I ever freaking wanted to, and they all kind of are terrible. And if I was a policymaker, I would have no idea what regulation would make platforms safer after reading the transparency reports that the platforms currently put out about, how they keep children safe. So how do we get beyond this kind of back and forth? Yeah.
Maybe one intervention, one kind of razor-sharp intervention that might solve that issue that Jeff talks about.
Through this community. The expertise that sits in this community, especially people who are really good, like PMs or frontline engineers, like that, the ability to translate an idea, an aspiration into operational or eng language and back is a superpower, and I think that we have underemployed it in this space and in these debates, and I wish that I saw a greater emphasis there.
Great.
Yeah, I would say that regulators and policymakers really need to hire more experts, and I'm not quite sure how to do that, considering the, let's say, remuneration imbalance, having been a civil servant myself. But I think really having great eng, really having great former product managers in there, data scientists, would be helpful. And so I'm hoping that, some of us in our next pivot are willing to do one more thing. And that one more thing should be figuring out ways to navigate between just regulate and don't do that. That's obviously a stupid idea. There is some pressure that can be helpful. And I think, zero knowledge proof age assurance technology, I think, is one of those things. Without that pressure, would we be talking about, would so many people be learning about zero knowledge proof age signal sharing? I think that's really helpful. Not that technical solution is like the silver bullet, but it is a helpful prompt for us to get creative.
And there has been a kind of an open door between policymakers policy professionals from platforms to regulators, certainly in the UK. A lot of folks were nabbed from big platforms, but less so engineering products, which I think is interesting. Mike, what would you do?
Yeah, the one thing I would say is just, a little humility on everybody's part in terms of dealing with these things. And there's part of lawmaking is often, okay, we have this problem, we're going to write a law, we passed this law, we've solved it, move on, forget about it. And these are issues where, as Charlotte famously says, everything is trade-offs when you're dealing with safety issues.
And sadness.
And sadness. I
Don't
left out
forget
the
the
sadness
sadness
part because we're short on time. But the regulatory process doesn't take that into account, that these systems need to be constantly tweaked and monitored. It would be great if we had a system where there was more iteration and more collaboration in terms of figuring out, okay, we're going to do this intervention. Does it work? Can we iterate? The tech world is sort of constantly iterating, like test this, we're going to roll this out, see if it works, and change and fix. The regulatory process isn't at all. And so it would be nice if there was some way to figure out a middle ground that would say, okay, you guys want to roll out this under 15 thing in France, like what are you going to do to measure it? Did it actually work? How are you going to change it if it doesn't work? I would love to see more of that.
Yeah. I have a question. How many people in the room are regulators?
We got a few.
Not many.
There's a few.
Thank them too.
Yeah. But I rest my case. Do we have... No.
We're being shut down.
Wait, okay, but so then can we close down? It's TrustCon's 5th birthday.
Yeah.
You guys, it's a really, for those of us who are parents, this is something we know, it's a really big birthday. Could we close out by singing Happy Birthday to TrustCon?
You got a lead, Kat.
All
You've
right.
got to leave.
Are we getting? But you guys have to be loud because I've got a mic. Yeah.
Someone has to take video.
Oh yeah. Harbot's of course she's on
We're
it.
getting video set up here.
Because
This was not planned, by the way. This is so impromptu.
Yeah,
I
this
love
no,
it.
this is just
this is Kat
my
taking
lack
charge.
of impulse control. Because TSPA, that team has worked so hard for so long and done such an incredible job for so many years, as has TSF. And I just think we should close this TrustCon by celebrating them and all of that
And
work.
thankfully, Happy Birthday is now in the public domain, so we can do this
There it
without
is.
without
There
getting
it
shut
is.
down. We have to. It all comes back to copyright in the end, in some
It's all
sense.
copyright. All roads lead to
All
copyright.
right, here we go. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear TrustCon. Happy birthday to you.
Guys, don't stop clapping. Keep clapping for our brilliant panelists. Thank you very much for joining us, everyone. We hope to see you next year. Have a great rest of TrustCon and safe journey home.
Thanks for listening to Ctrl-Alt-Speech. Subscribe now to get our weekly episodes as soon as they're released. If your company or organization is interested in sponsoring the podcast, contact us by visiting Ctrl-Alt-Speech.com. That's CTRL-Alt-Speech.com.